The morning Beatrice Turner stepped off the train in Naco, Arizona in 1883. Her silk dress caught on a splinter of the weathered platform and tore clean through, which seemed like Providence telling her she had made the right decision in leaving everything behind. She stood there with her 3 leather trunks, watching the locomotive disappear into the desert horizon, and felt the first real breath of freedom expand in her chest, despite the choking dust that swirled around her expensive boots. Behind her lay San Francisco, her father's banking empire, and a betrothed she had never loved, a man whose fortune matched her own but whose heart was as cold as the gold he counted. Before her lay nothing but possibility and the raw, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory. The platform was nearly empty except for a Mexican woman selling tamales from a cart and a cowboy leaning against a post, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Beatrice lifted her chin and tried to look like she knew what she was doing, though in truth she had never been more terrified or more alive. She had exactly $200 sewn into the lining of her coat, a small fortune to most, but nothing compared to what she had walked away from. Her father would be discovering her letter by now, the one explaining that she could not marry Charles Whitmore, that she could not live the rest of her life in drawing rooms and opera houses, pretending to care about things that meant nothing. "You look lost, miss." The voice came from the cowboy, and when he pushed his hat back, Beatrice found herself looking into the most honest pair of brown eyes she had ever seen. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked like they knew hard work. There was dust on his worn denim pants, and his boots had seen better days, but something about him made her heart skip in a way that Charles Whitmore's perfectly tailored suits never had. "I suppose I am," she admitted, surprised at her own honesty. "I am looking for a place to stay. Somewhere inexpensive." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her fine dress and expensive luggage, and she watched something like amusement flicker across his features. "Inexpensive is not usually what ladies like you are after. I am not like most ladies." The words came out more defensive than she intended, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert sun. "I can see that." He straightened and walked toward her, moving with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "Name is Ethan Fletcher. I work the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north of here. Mrs. Garcia runs a boarding house on the edge of town. Clean rooms, decent food, and she does not ask too many questions." "That sounds perfect." Beatrice extended her hand in the way she had been taught in finishing school and watched his eyes widen slightly before he took it. His palm was calloused and warm, and the handshake was brief, but it sent electricity racing up her arm. "Beatrice Turner." "Well, Miss Turner, welcome to Naco. Though I got to say, you picked one hell of a place to land if you are looking for comfort and luxury." "I am not looking for comfort and luxury," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "I am looking for something real." Something shifted in his expression, a recognition or understanding that made her pulse quicken. "Real is about all we got out here." He bent to pick up 2 of her trunks as if they weighed nothing, which they certainly did not. "Come on, I will take you to Mrs. Garcia. Fair warning, though, she's going to ask you 1,000 questions no matter what I said about her not asking." Beatrice grabbed the smallest trunk and followed him down the dusty main street of Naco. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a collection of wooden buildings baking in the relentless sun. There was a general store, a saloon, a smithy, and a few other establishments she could not quite make out. Men in dusty clothes watched them pass with open curiosity, and she kept her head high, refusing to show the nervousness that churned in her stomach. Mrs. Garcia's boarding house was a low, adobe structure that stayed blessedly cool despite the heat outside. The proprietor herself was a round woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile who looked Beatrice up and down with frank assessment. Ethan spoke to her in rapid Spanish, which surprised Beatrice, and Mrs. Garcia responded in kind, before turning to her with that same appraising look. "You running from something, girl?" she asked bluntly. "Yes," Beatrice said, because there seemed no point in lying. "But not the law. I am running from a life I did not choose." Mrs. Garcia nodded as if this made perfect sense. $2 a week includes breakfast and supper. You got money?" "I do." "Then we try it for a week and see if you can stomach it here. Most fancy ladies cannot handle the desert." She said it without judgment, just stating a fact, and Beatrice found herself liking the woman immediately. Ethan set down the trunks in a small room that held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single wooden chair. It was smaller than her dressing room back in San Francisco, but the window looked out over the endless expanse of desert and mountains, and she felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you," she said to Ethan. "You did not have to help me. Could not just leave you standing there on the platform." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but settled for touching the brim of his hat. "If you need anything, most folks know where to find me. Ranch is north, like I said." After he left, Beatrice sank onto the bed and let herself shake for a moment. She had done it. She had actually left everything behind and come to this wild, raw place where no one knew her family name or cared about her pedigree. The enormity of it threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed the feeling down and began unpacking her trunks. Most of what she had brought would be useless here. The silk dresses, the embroidered gloves, the delicate shoes, all of it was designed for a life she no longer wanted. That evening at supper, she met the other boarders. There was a prospector named Samuel who spent most of his time in the mountains looking for silver, a traveling preacher named Father Benedict who was heading further south, and a young woman named Rosa who worked at the general store. They all stared at Beatrice with undisguised curiosity, taking in her fine clothes and cultured accent. "What brings you to Naco, Miss Turner?" Father Benedict asked politely, passing her a bowl of beans. "I needed a change," she said simply, and was relieved when no one pressed further. Rosa, who could not have been more than 20, leaned forward eagerly. "Did you really come all the way from San Francisco? What is it like? I have never been further than Tucson." Beatrice smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. "It is crowded and foggy and full of people who care more about appearances than truth. I much prefer this." "You say that now," Samuel said with a chuckle, "but wait until August when it is so hot you can fry an egg on a rock. Or wait until you have been here long enough that the dust gets into everything, including your soul." But Beatrice just shook her head. "I think I will like it here." The next morning, she woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and discovered that Mrs. Garcia expected everyone to earn their keep beyond just paying rent. Beatrice found herself in the kitchen learning to make tortillas, her soft hands clumsy with the masa. Mrs. Garcia corrected her patiently, showing her how to pat the dough flat, and slowly Beatrice began to get the rhythm of it. "Why did you really come here?" Mrs. Garcia asked quietly while they worked. "You could be anywhere." "My father wanted me to marry a man I did not love, a man who saw me as a pretty addition to his collection of fine things. I could not do it. I could not spend my life being looked at, but never truly seen." Mrs. Garcia nodded slowly. "And you think you will find something different here?" "I hope so. I want to find out who I am when I am not being Miss Turner of the San Francisco Turners. I want to matter because of what I do, not because of whose daughter I am." "That is a good reason," Mrs. Garcia said, "but this place will test you. It is not gentle with anyone, especially not women who are used to soft living. "I am stronger than I look," Beatrice said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Over the next week, she began to settle into a routine that would have horrified her mother. She helped Mrs. Garcia with cooking and cleaning, getting her hands dirty in ways she never had before. Her fingernails, once perfectly manicured, became chipped and stained. Her skin, despite her best efforts, began to tan and freckle. She traded some of her fine dresses to Rosa for practical calico and cotton, clothes that could withstand the dust and heat. And everywhere she went, she found herself looking for Ethan Fletcher. She saw him occasionally when he came to town for supplies, always polite but distant, touching his hat and exchanging pleasantries before going about his business. She learned from the gossip of the other women that he was 26, had been working ranches since he was 14, and was known as one of the best horsemen in the territory. He was also, according to Rosa, who sighed dramatically while sharing this information, completely uninterested in settling down with any of the local girls who had set their caps for him. "He is married to that ranch," Rosa said. "Works from sunup to sundown and then some. Mr. Richardson, who owns the Double R, thinks the world of him, but Ethan does not own anything himself. Just saves every penny and keeps to himself mostly." Beatrice told herself she was not interested, that she had not come all this way just to fall for another man, that she needed to figure out who she was first. But her heart did not listen to logic, and every time she caught sight of him riding down the main street, tall and easy in the saddle, she felt something flutter in her chest. It was 3 weeks after her arrival when everything changed. She was walking back from the general store, her arms full of supplies for Mrs. Garcia, when she heard shouting from the saloon. Before she could react, the doors burst open and 2 men tumbled out, fists flying. She pressed herself against the wall of the store, watching in shock as they rolled in the dust, trading blows while a crowd gathered to watch. Then one of them pulled a knife. Beatrice did not think. She grabbed the nearest thing, which happened to be a bucket of water meant for the horses, and threw it over both of them. The sudden deluge shocked them into stopping, and they stared at her with matching expressions of surprise. The entire crowd had gone silent, everyone looking at this fancy woman who had just doused 2 fighting men like they were misbehaving dogs. "That is enough," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Whatever you are fighting about cannot be worth killing each other." One of the men, a burly cowboy with blood streaming from his nose, started to laugh. "Hell, lady, you got nerve, but this does not concern you. It concerns everyone when there is violence in the street," she said firmly. "This is a community, not the Wild West of dime novels. We should be better than this." "Pretty speech," the other man said, wiping water from his face. "But you do not know what you are talking about. This bastard owes me money." "Then take him to see the sheriff. Fighting will not get your money back. It will just land you both in jail." Before anyone could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "The lady is right." Ethan Fletcher pushed through the crowd, his expression hard. "You two want to kill each other, do it outside of town where decent people do not have to watch. Otherwise, take it to Sheriff Martinez." The 2 men looked at each other, then at Ethan, and something in his calm authority made them back down. They muttered curses and stalked off in opposite directions, and the crowd slowly dispersed, disappointed at being denied their entertainment. Ethan turned to Beatrice, and she could not quite read the expression in his eyes. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he said quietly. "Perhaps both." Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, and she tightened her grip on her packages to hide it. "I just could not stand there and watch. Most people would have. Most people would have looked away and let it happen. He took the packages from her arms before she could protest. "Come on, I will walk you back to Mrs. Garcia's." They walked in silence for a moment before Beatrice found her voice. "Does that happen often, the fighting?" "Often enough. Lot of men out here with nothing to lose and too much anger. Whiskey does not help." He glanced at her sideways. "You handled it well, kept your head." "My father always said I was too impulsive, that I acted without thinking of consequences. He meant it as a criticism. Sounds like a compliment to me. World needs more people willing to act when something is not right." His words warmed her more than they should have, and she found herself stealing glances at him as they walked. Up close, she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor let on. The way his sun-streaked brown hair curled slightly at his collar. He was nothing like the men she had known in San Francisco with their pomade and cologne and soft hands. Everything about him was honest and real and solid. "Why did you help me that first day?" she asked suddenly. "When I got off the train. You did not know me." He was quiet for a long moment. "You looked lost but not broken, scared but not running. I guess I was curious what would bring someone like you to a place like this. Someone like me. Someone who clearly came from money and comfort. Someone who could have anything but chose to have nothing." He stopped at the gate to Mrs. Garcia's and handed back her packages. "You figuring out yet what you came here to find?" "Maybe," she said softly, looking up at him. "I think I am figuring out what I did not want, which is a start." Something passed between them then, a recognition that felt like standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful. Ethan cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should get back. Ranch work does not wait." "Ethan," he turned at the sound of his name, "thank you for helping today. And for that first day too." He touched his hat brim and smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "Anytime, Miss Turner." She watched him walk away and felt something shift irrevocably in her heart. This was what she had been missing in San Francisco, this feeling of genuine connection, of being seen as herself rather than as an ornament or a status symbol. Charles Whitmore had never looked at her the way Ethan Fletcher just had, like she was interesting and surprising and worth knowing. That evening she wrote a letter to her mother. Not to her father, who would be too angry to read it, but to her mother who she thought might understand. She explained that she was safe, that she was learning to take care of herself, that she was finally beginning to understand what it meant to be truly alive. She did not mention Ethan because there was nothing yet to mention, just a growing feeling that she could not quite name. The next Sunday, Beatrice attended the small church service that Father Benedict held in the schoolhouse. She wore one of her simpler dresses, though even that was finer than what most of the women wore, and took a seat near the back. She was surprised when Ethan slipped into the pew beside her just as the service started, smelling of soap and leather. "Did not figure you for the religious type," she whispered. "Could say the same about you," he whispered back, and she had to bite her lip to keep from smiling. The service was simple and earnest, nothing like the grand productions she was used to in San Francisco's churches. Father Benedict spoke about finding grace in hardship, about how the desert had a way of stripping away everything false and leaving only truth. Beatrice felt the words settle into her bones, affirming the decision she had made to come here. Afterward, there was a community meal in the dusty yard outside. Women had brought dishes to share, simple food made with care, and everyone ate standing or sitting on whatever they could find. Beatrice helped Mrs. Garcia serve, and noticed how Ethan kept glancing her way when he thought she was not looking. "You should talk to him properly," Mrs. Garcia said under her breath. "That boy has been watching you like you are water and he is dying of thirst." I do not want to presume anything, Beatrice said, but her heart was racing. Life is too short for presuming. Out here, you take what happiness you can find and hold on tight. Mrs. Garcia gave her a gentle push toward where Ethan stood talking with some other ranch hands. Go on. Beatrice walked over, her courage almost failing her, but then Ethan saw her and his face lit up in a way that made her feel like the sun had come out. Miss Turner, you want to take a walk? There is a nice view just up the ridge if you do not mind the climb. I would like that. They walked together through the scrub brush and scattered mesquite trees, following a faint trail that led upward. Ethan offered his hand to help her over rough spots, and each time their fingers touched, Beatrice felt that spark of connection grow stronger. At the top of the ridge, they could see for miles in every direction, the desert spreading out in shades of gold and brown and red, the mountains purple in the distance. It is beautiful, she breathed. Harsh but beautiful. That is a good way to describe it. This land does not forgive weakness, but it rewards honesty. He turned to look at her. Can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really come here? And do not tell me you needed a change. There is more to it than that. She took a deep breath and decided on truth. I was supposed to marry a man in 2 weeks. A man my father chose because he came from the right family and had the right connections. Charles was handsome and educated and said all the correct things, but when he looked at me, I felt nothing. No warmth, no curiosity, no real feeling at all. He wanted a wife who would look pretty on his arm and run his household efficiently and give him heirs. He did not want me. He did not even know me well enough to want me. So you ran. I left, she corrected gently. I left a note and took only what I could carry and bought a train ticket to the furthest place I could think of. My father will be furious. He will probably disown me. I will never be able to go back to that life. You want to go back? No. The word came out fierce and certain. I would rather scrub floors and make tortillas and live in a tiny room than go back to being a pretty doll in a fancy house. At least here, I matter because of what I do, not because of whose daughter I am. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze on the horizon. I do not have anything to offer you, he said finally. I work for wages, save what I can, but it will be years before I could afford my own place. I live in a bunkhouse with 5 other men. I own 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and a horse that is more ornery than sweet. I am nobody special, just another cowboy trying to make a living in a hard land. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. Why are you telling me this? He turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Because I have been thinking about you every day since you stepped off that train. Because you are the most interesting woman I have ever met, and I want to know everything about you. Because when you threw that water on those idiots fighting, I wanted to cheer. And because I need you to know what you would be getting into if you spent any more time with me. You gave up a fortune to come here. I cannot give you anything except honest work and a whole lot of hardship. What about your heart? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Can you offer me that? His expression softened into something that made her want to cry. Yeah, Beatrice, I can offer you that. Pretty sure you already have it if you want it. She closed the distance between them and took his hands, rough and calloused and real. I left San Francisco looking for something authentic, something true. I think I found it. She looked up at him. I am not going to pretend I know how to be a cowboy's girl. I cannot rope cattle or ride worth a damn, and I burn half of what I try to cook. But I am willing to learn. I am willing to work hard. And I know my own heart well enough to know that what I feel when I look at you is more real than anything I felt in 23 years of fancy living. Ethan laughed, and it was a sound of pure joy. Well then, I guess we are going to figure this out together. He cupped her face in his hands, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and when she did not, He kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste kiss Charles had given her when they became engaged, dry and brief and meaningless. This kiss was warm and deep and full of promise, tasting like coffee and possibility. Beatrice wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with everything she had, not caring that they were standing on a ridge where anyone could see, not caring about propriety or what would be proper. This was real. This was true. This was what she had been searching for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I cannot believe you are real. I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find out you were just a dream." "I am very real," she promised, "and I am not going anywhere." They stayed on the ridge until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on his family's failing farm in Texas, about watching his parents work themselves into early graves trying to make something grow in soil that would not yield, about heading west at 14 with nothing but determination. She told him about the suffocating expectations of San Francisco society, about her mother's gentle sadness and her father's cold ambition, about reading adventure novels and dreaming of a life that meant something. "Your father is going to come looking for you," Ethan said. "Men like that do not let go of what they think belongs to them. Let him come. I am not his property to reclaim." "I am serious, Beatrice. He could make things very difficult. He has money and connections, and I have neither." She squeezed his hand. "Then we will face it together. I did not come all this way just to run at the first sign of trouble." As they walked back down to town, hand in hand, Beatrice felt lighter than she had in years. The future was uncertain and probably difficult, but it was hers to choose. She was choosing this man with his honest eyes and gentle strength, this life of hard work and simple pleasures, this raw, beautiful land that demanded everything and gave back only what you earned. The next weeks fell into a pattern that felt right down to her bones. Ethan came to town whenever he could spare the time, which was not often enough but made each meeting precious. They walked together, talked for hours, and stole kisses when they thought no one was looking. Mrs. Garcia watched them with approval, though she warned Beatrice that loving a cowboy meant accepting long absences and constant worry. "The work is dangerous," she said seriously. "Horses throw riders, cattle stampede, men get hurt or worse. You need to be strong enough to handle that fear." "I am strong enough," Beatrice said, and was surprised to find it was true. The weeks of physical work had changed her, building muscle and calluses, but more than that, it had built confidence. She was learning that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. She also began teaching reading and writing to some of the Mexican children in town, using the education that had once seemed useless for anything practical. Their eager faces and quick minds filled her with purpose, and she loved watching them master letters and words, opening doors to knowledge. She did not charge for the lessons because most families had little to spare, but they repaid her in other ways, with fresh eggs or vegetables from their gardens or help with her chores. It was nearly 2 months after her arrival when the trouble came. Beatrice was in the general store helping Rosa sort through a new shipment of fabric when she heard the commotion outside. Through the window, she saw an expensive carriage that looked completely out of place in dusty Naco, and her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. "It cannot be." But it was. Charles Whitmore stepped down from the carriage, looking immaculate in his tailored suit and polished boots, scanning the street with distaste. Behind him came another man, younger and harder looking, who she did not recognize. Rosa grabbed her arm. "Who are they?" "My past," Beatrice said grimly. "Stay here." She stepped outside before they could start making inquiries and drawing attention. Charles saw her immediately, and his expression flickered through surprise, distaste at her simple dress and tanned skin, and then cold anger. "Beatrice, your father has been frantic." "My father has been angry that I did not obey him," she corrected, keeping her voice steady. "How did you find me? It took some effort and a great deal of money, but I am nothing if not persistent. When I invest in something, I see it through to completion." His tone made it clear he put her in the same category as stocks and property. "You have had your little adventure. It is time to come home and stop this nonsense." "I am home," Beatrice said clearly, "and I am not going anywhere with you." The other man moved closer, and she noticed the gun at his hip. "Miss Turner, your father hired me to ensure your safe return to San Francisco. One way or another, you are coming with us. You cannot force me. I am of legal age and I came here of my own free will." Charles smiled, and it was not pleasant. "Actually, we can. Your father has had doctors sign statements attesting to your mental instability. Apparently, only a madwoman would leave behind everything you did. We have the legal right to take you into custody for your own protection." Horror and rage warred in her chest. "That is a lie. I am perfectly sane." "Are you? You left your family, your fiancé, your entire life to come to this God-forsaken desert town to do what exactly? Wash dishes, teach peasant children." He said it like she had announced she was digging ditches. "No rational woman would make such a choice. A rational woman would refuse to be sold like cattle to a man who does not love her." Her voice was rising now, and people were starting to gather. "I will not go with you, Charles. You can tell my father he no longer has any power over me." "We will see about that." Charles nodded to the hired man, who started toward her, but before he could reach her, Ethan was suddenly there, moving between them with easy confidence. "I do not think the lady wants to go with you." Charles looked him up and down with open contempt. "And who might you be? The local sheriff, just someone who cares what happens to her, which is more than I can say for you." "This does not concern you, Cowboy. This is a family matter." "Beatrice is not your family," Ethan said calmly. "She is a grown woman making her own choices. And unless you have actual legal documents from a real judge, not just some papers your money bought, you have no right to force her anywhere." The hired man's hand drifted toward his gun. "Back off, friend. You do not want to get involved in this." "Too late. I am already involved." Ethan did not move, did not flinch, just stood his ground with quiet strength. Sheriff Martinez appeared then, drawn by the growing crowd. He was a lean older man with silver in his hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "What is the trouble here?" Charles drew himself up. "Sheriff, I am Charles Whitmore from San Francisco. This young woman is my fiancée and she is unwell. I have legal documentation that she needs to be returned to her family for proper care." "Is that so?" Sheriff Martinez turned to Beatrice. "Miss Turner, is that true? Are you his fiancée?" "I was," she said clearly. "I broke the engagement before I left San Francisco. I am not unwell, Sheriff. I simply refuse to marry a man I do not love, and my father is using his money and influence to try to force me back." "You want to go with these men?" "Absolutely not." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Then I suggest you gentlemen get back in your fancy carriage and head back where you came from. We do not take kindly to folks trying to abduct women against their will, no matter what papers you think you have." "This is outrageous," Charles sputtered. "I will report you to the territorial authorities." "You do that. But while you are in my town, you will respect the law and the people in it. Miss Turner says she does not want to go with you, and that is good enough for me." His hand rested on his own gun, and his meaning was clear. Charles looked around at the gathered crowd, at the hard faces of the townspeople who had come to know Beatrice, at Ethan standing protectively beside her, and seemed to realize he was beaten. "This is not over, Beatrice. Your father will not stop. He will hire lawyers, investigators, whatever it takes. Let him, she said, and was proud that her voice did not shake. I am not his to command anymore. They watched the carriage roll away, and Beatrice felt Ethan's hand find hers. She was shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her, and he pulled her close. The crowd began to disperse, people patting her shoulder in passing, showing their support in small gestures that meant everything. "You all right?" Sheriff Martinez asked. "I think so. Thank you for intervening." "Do not thank me yet. He was right that your father probably will not stop. Men with that kind of money and pride tend to keep pushing until they get what they want or something stops them permanent. What can I do? Honestly, not much. He could tie you up in court for years if he wanted, claim you are not of sound mind, make your life hell." The sheriff looked between her and Ethan. "Best thing would be if you were married to someone else. Hard to claim a woman needs to come home to her family when she has a husband and a legal claim to independence." The suggestion hung in the air. Ethan cleared his throat. "Sheriff, can I have a moment alone with Miss Turner?" "Take all the time you need. I will be in my office if you need me." After he left, Ethan turned to Beatrice, still holding her hands. "He is right. If we were married, your father could not claim any legal right to you. You would be under my protection, and even the courts would uphold that. Ethan, I cannot ask you to marry me just to save me from my father. That would not be fair to you. You are not asking, I am offering." He took a deep breath. "I know we have not been courting long. I know this is fast and probably crazy, but I also know that I love you, Beatrice Turner. I love your courage and your kindness, and the way you dove into this life without looking back. I love how you are not afraid to get your hands dirty, how you care about those kids you teach, how you threw water on two idiots because you could not stand by and do nothing." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first day when you helped me without asking for anything in return. Then marry me, not just because it is the practical solution, though it is. Marry me because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life with you. Marry me because when I think about the future, you are the only thing I see clearly." He smiled crookedly. "I still do not have anything to offer you except hard work and a heart that is completely yours, but if that is enough, then say yes." "It is more than enough," she whispered. "Yes, Ethan Fletcher, I will marry you." He kissed her right there in the middle of the street, and she kissed him back, not caring who saw. When they finally broke apart, half the town was watching and someone started clapping. Then others joined in, and suddenly they were surrounded by well-wishers and congratulations. Mrs. Garcia was crying happy tears. "Finally, I was wondering how long you two would dance around each other." "We need to do this quick," Ethan said, "before her father can send lawyers or try something else. Tomorrow if we can arrange it." Father Benedict stepped forward. "I can perform the ceremony." "Tomorrow afternoon, if you are both certain." They looked at each other and spoke simultaneously. "We are certain." That night, Beatrice lay in her small room and thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 months. She had left San Francisco as a frightened girl, running from an unwanted future. She was becoming a woman who knew her own mind, who had found real love and real purpose in the most unexpected place. Tomorrow she would marry Ethan Fletcher with nothing but the simple dress on her back and the love in her heart. And she could not wait. The wedding was nothing like the elaborate affair that had been planned with Charles. There was no orchestra, no hundreds of guests, no cake that cost more than most people earned in a year. Instead, they gathered in the schoolhouse where Beatrice taught her classes, with everyone in town who could spare the time. Mrs. Garcia had picked wildflowers that morning, tough desert blooms that survived in impossible conditions, and Rosa had helped Beatrice fix her hair. She wore her simplest dress, pale blue cotton that had been her traveling outfit, and carried the wildflowers. Ethan wore his cleanest shirt and had clearly made an effort to tame his hair. When she walked down the aisle between the rough benches, his face lit up like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and she knew she was making the right choice. Father Benedict kept the ceremony short and sweet, talking about how love was a choice you made every day, not just a feeling but a commitment to stand by someone through hardship and joy. When it came time for vows, Ethan took her hands and spoke from his heart. "I promise to love you every day of my life. I promise to work hard to give you the best life I can, even if it is not always easy. I promise to listen when you talk and hold you when you cry and laugh at your jokes even when they are terrible. I promise to see you as you are, not as what anyone else thinks you should be." Beatrice's voice shook but held steady as she responded. "I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, good or bad. I promise to make a home wherever we are, whether it is a mansion or a tent in the desert. I promise to choose you every single day, not because I have to, but because I want to." They exchanged simple gold bands that Ethan had bought with money he had been saving, and when Father Benedict pronounced them married, the kiss they shared was tender and full of promise. The small crowd erupted in cheers, and Beatrice laughed against Ethan's lips, feeling more joy than she had known was possible. The celebration afterward was simple but heartfelt. Someone produced a fiddle and there was dancing in the street as the sun set. Beatrice danced with her new husband, learning the steps of frontier dances that were nothing like the formal waltzes she had learned in finishing school. These were wild and free and joyful, full of stomping feet and spinning skirts and genuine laughter. "Happy?" Ethan asked, pulling her close during a slower song. "Incredibly. I did not know I could be this happy." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for being brave enough to leave everything behind and come find me." That night, they consummated their marriage in the small room at Mrs. Garcia's that now belonged to both of them. Ethan was gentle and patient, aware that this was all new to her, and the intimacy felt like a natural extension of everything they had been building together. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Beatrice felt completely at peace for the first time in her life. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now we figure it out together. I have been talking to Mr. Richardson about maybe getting a small cabin built for us on the ranch property. Won't be much, but it would be ours. I also been saving to eventually buy some land, start my own herd. Won't happen overnight, but with both of us working toward it, maybe in a few years. I can keep teaching, bring in a little money that way, and Mrs. Garcia says she will pay me for helping at the boarding house." He stroked her hair. "We are going to make it work. It will not be easy, but I think we can build something real here." "We already have," she said, kissing him softly. "We already have." The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Beatrice moved out to the Double R Ranch, to a tiny cabin that the ranch hands helped build in their spare time. It was one room with a stone fireplace, a table Ethan built himself, and a bed that took up most of the space. She loved it fiercely. She continued teaching in town 3 days a week, walking the 5 miles each way or sometimes riding behind Ethan on his horse. The work was hard in ways she never could have imagined in San Francisco. She learned to cook over a fire, to mend clothes until they could not be mended anymore, to stretch every penny until it screamed. Her hands became rough and scarred, her body lean and strong from physical labor. She learned to tend a vegetable garden in the hostile desert soil, to preserve food for winter, to make soap and candles. But she also learned joy in ways she never had before. The satisfaction of a meal well cooked with ingredients she had grown herself. The pride of seeing her students master reading and begin to devour books. The simple pleasure of falling into bed exhausted beside the man she loved, and knowing that every bit of what they had earned together. 3 months into their marriage, a letter arrived from San Francisco. Beatrice's hands shook as she opened it, expecting rage or threats, but instead found her mother's careful handwriting. "My dearest Beatrice, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. Your father is still furious and has forbidden me from contacting you, but I had to let you know that I understand why you left. I have lived the life you refused, married the man I was told to marry, and I have been comfortably miserable for 30 years. I am glad you were brave enough to choose differently. Your father has told everyone you are visiting relatives back east. I suspect eventually he will have to admit the truth, but his pride will not allow it yet. I have enclosed some money that is mine, not his. It is not much, but I thought it might help. Please write to me care of my sister in Sacramento if you can. I want to know that you are truly happy. All my love, Mother." Inside was $200, which was a fortune to them. Beatrice cried reading it, missing her mother fiercely but also grateful for her understanding. She wrote back immediately, telling her mother about Ethan, about their tiny cabin and her teaching and the life they were building. She did not mention how hard it was sometimes, how she fell into bed exhausted most nights, how she sometimes craved a hot bath and soft bed. Instead, she focused on the truth, that she was happier than she had ever been, that she had found real love and real purpose. As fall turned to winter, life settled into its patterns. The work changed with the seasons but never stopped. Ethan sometimes had to be away for days at a time, helping drive cattle to market or mending fences in distant sections of the ranch. Those absences were hard, the cabin feeling too empty without him, but it made their reunions all the sweeter. One evening in late November, Beatrice realized her monthly courses were late. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Ethan's hopes up, but when another month passed, she could no longer deny it. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had seen enough of frontier life to know how dangerous childbirth could be out here, far from proper doctors and hospitals. She told Ethan on a cold December night, watching his face carefully as she said the words, "I think I am going to have a baby." His expression cycled through shock, wonder, and then pure joy. "Really? Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. Mrs. Garcia confirmed my suspicions. She has delivered enough babies to know the signs." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "We are going to have a baby, a real family. Are you happy? I know we are barely making it as it is and another mouth to feed. I am terrified and thrilled and so damn happy I could burst." He pulled back to cup her face. "We will figure it out. We always do." The pregnancy was not easy. The physical work of frontier life did not stop just because she was carrying a child, though Ethan and Mrs. Garcia both insisted she take it easier. She continued teaching as long as she could, grateful for work that did not require heavy lifting. As her belly grew, she felt the baby move, strong kicks that made both her and Ethan laugh with wonder. In the spring of 1884, on a warm May evening, Beatrice went into labor. Mrs. Garcia came to stay with them, along with another woman from town who had experience with birthing. Ethan was banished outside, pacing back and forth while the women worked. The labor was long and painful and terrifying, hours of work that left Beatrice exhausted and certain she would die. But then, just as dawn was breaking, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying, strong and healthy. Mrs. Garcia wrapped the infant and placed the bundle in her arms. "You have a son, Mija, a perfect, beautiful boy." Beatrice looked down at the tiny red face, at the dark hair and eyes that would probably be brown like his father's, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Ethan was allowed in then, and when he saw her holding their son, tears streamed down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered, touching one tiny hand with his work-roughened finger. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything. Now, looking at her son, Beatrice knew. Thomas. After my grandfather, the only person in my family who ever encouraged me to think for myself. Thomas Fletcher. Ethan tested the name and smiled. "I like it." The first months of motherhood were the hardest thing Beatrice had ever done. Harder than leaving San Francisco, harder than learning to survive in the desert, harder than labor itself. Thomas was a fussy baby who did not sleep well and demanded constant attention. Beatrice was exhausted all the time, struggling to keep up with the work of the cabin and the ranch and the endless needs of an infant. But there were moments of pure magic, too. The first time Thomas smiled at her, really smiled, not just gas. The way he calmed when Ethan sang to him in his deep voice, old cowboy songs that were probably not appropriate for babies, but Thomas did not care. The feeling of holding him while he slept, so small and trusting and completely dependent on them. Mrs. Garcia came often to help, teaching Beatrice how to manage a baby and a household. "It gets easier," she promised during one particularly difficult day when Thomas would not stop crying and Beatrice was so tired she wanted to cry too. "The first few months are survival, then you get little breaks. Then one day you wake up and realize you are actually enjoying it." She was right. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, things had settled into a manageable routine. He was sleeping longer stretches at night, smiling and cooing during the day, becoming a little person with preferences and personality. Beatrice went back to teaching part-time, bringing Thomas with her. The students adored him, taking turns holding him while she worked. Life continued its steady march forward. Ethan got a small raise from Mr. Richardson in recognition of his hard work and loyalty. With the money from Beatrice's mother and their careful saving, they managed to buy 10 acres of land just north of town. It was not much, rocky and dry, but it was theirs. Ethan began planning for the day when he could run his own small herd there. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's brown eyes and his mother's determination. He learned to walk holding onto the furniture of their small cabin, then running everywhere once he had mastered it. He spoke early, full of questions about everything he saw. Beatrice taught him letters and numbers, delighting in his quick mind. When Thomas was 2, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier because she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret, arrived on a cool November morning in 1886. She was tiny and delicate where Thomas had been sturdy, with light brown hair and eyes that would eventually turn green like her mother's. Their little cabin felt cramped now with 4 people, so Ethan spent his spare time building an addition. It went slowly because there was never quite enough money or time, but gradually they expanded, adding a second room that could be for the children. Other ranch hands helped when they could, and slowly their home grew. Beatrice's students now included some ranch children as well as the Mexican families in town. She taught them all together, believing firmly that education should be for everyone regardless of background. Some of the wealthier ranchers grumbled about their children mixing with Mexican kids, but Beatrice held firm. This was her classroom, and in it, everyone was equal. In 1888, when Thomas was 4 and Margaret 2, Mr. Richardson offered Ethan a partnership in the Double R. He was getting older and had no children of his own, and he had come to trust Ethan implicitly. It meant more responsibility and longer hours, but also a share in the profits. Ethan came home that day looking dazed, hardly able to believe his good fortune. "It is because you earned it," Beatrice told him firmly. "You have worked harder than anyone for years. He knows your worth." "We could really make something now," Ethan said, looking at their little land. "Maybe in a few years start our own operation." They continued saving, planning, working toward their dreams. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that killed crops and dried up water sources. There were illnesses that swept through town, carrying off the very young and very old. There were financial panics back east that even reached them in Arizona, making money tight. There were moments when Beatrice was so tired and overwhelmed she wanted to cry. But there were also moments of perfect happiness. Thomas learning to ride his first pony, his face split with joy. Margaret taking her first steps, wobbling across the cabin into Beatrice's waiting arms. Evenings sitting on their small porch watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors while their children played. Ethan pulling her into his arms after the kids were asleep and telling her he loved her, still with the same wonder as the first time. In 1890, they had their third child, another son they named William. He was a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world around him. Thomas, now 6, took his role as big brother seriously, helping watch the younger two while Beatrice worked. Margaret was 4 and growing into a thoughtful child who loved books almost as much as her mother did. That same year, Beatrice received another letter from her mother. Her father had died of a heart attack, sudden and final. Her mother was finally free to acknowledge her daughter publicly again, and she wanted to visit. Beatrice agreed, nervous about her two worlds colliding but wanting her mother to meet her grandchildren. When her mother stepped off the train in Naco, Beatrice almost did not recognize her. She looked older, grayer, but there was something lighter about her too, as if a weight had been lifted. They embraced on the platform, both crying, years of separation falling away. "Let me see them," her mother said. "Let me meet my grandchildren." Beatrice brought her back to their cabin, now expanded but still modest by any standard. She watched her mother take in the rough furniture, the simple cooking area, the children's toys scattered across the floor. Then Thomas ran up, all boundless energy and questions, and Margaret followed shyly, and baby William cooed from his basket. Her mother's face transformed. She knelt down and gathered the children close, and Beatrice saw tears streaming down her face. "They are beautiful, absolutely beautiful." Over the week of her visit, Beatrice's mother got to know her grandchildren and her son-in-law. Beatrice watched her mother watch them, seeing the love and pride in her eyes. On the last evening, they sat on the porch together while Ethan put the children to bed inside. "I was wrong," her mother said quietly. "I should have been braver like you. I should have refused the life your father wanted for me. Instead, I lived in comfortable misery for 30 years, and I let him try to force you into the same trap. You are here now. That is what matters. You are happy, truly happy. I can see it in everything you do, the way you look at your husband, how you are with your children. This is what love should be. I wish you could have had this too." Her mother smiled sadly. "Perhaps in another life, but I can have joy in knowing you found it. That my grandchildren will grow up seeing what real love looks like, not the cold arrangement your father and I had." When her mother left, she promised to visit again and to write regularly. She also left them a substantial sum of money, her inheritance from Beatrice's father. He would have hated me giving this to you, which is why I take such pleasure in doing it. Build your dreams, my darling. You have earned them." The money allowed them to finally realize their plans. They bought more land, bringing their holdings to 60 acres. They purchased a small herd of cattle and began running their own operation alongside Ethan's work at the Double R. It meant even more work, but it also meant building something lasting for their children. Beatrice cut back on teaching to focus on managing their growing household and helping with the ranch work. She had 4 children now, another daughter born in 1893, who they named Clara. Their cabin had become a proper house through years of additions, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen. It was still modest, but it was theirs, every board and nail paid for with honest work. Thomas was growing into a capable young man, already learning the ranch work from his father at age 9. Margaret loved learning and showed promise as a teacher herself. William was steady and reliable at 3, while baby Clara was fierce and fearless from the start. In 1895, Mr. Richardson died, leaving his share of the Double R to Ethan in his will. It stunned everyone, but the old rancher's lawyer read the letter he had left explaining his decision. "Ethan Fletcher is the most honest, hard-working man I have ever known. He has earned this through years of loyal service and integrity. I know he will care for the land and the people who work it better than anyone." Suddenly, they were ranchers in their own right, responsible for hundreds of acres and dozens of employees. It was terrifying and thrilling. They merged their small operation with the Double R, creating one of the larger ranches in southern Arizona. Beatrice found herself managing household staff and hosting other ranchers' wives, using skills she had learned in San Francisco, but with a different purpose now. Life had come full circle in unexpected ways. She had money again, though nothing like her father's wealth, but this time it was money she and Ethan had earned together. She had status in the community, but it was based on respect for what they had built, not inherited position. She had a beautiful home, but one that had grown organically from a one-room cabin rather than being handed to her. And most importantly, she had love. Real, deep, abiding love that had only grown stronger through the years. She watched Ethan with their children, patient and kind and strong, and felt grateful every day for the decision she had made to step off that train in Naco. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1895, they stood on the porch of their house watching the sun set over land that was theirs. Thomas was 11, Margaret 9, William 5, and Clara 2. Inside, their children were playing some game that involved a lot of laughing and running. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked, pulling her close. "Leaving all that luxury and comfort for this," Beatrice laughed. "Not for a single second. That was not living, Ethan. It was existing in a pretty cage. This is living. The hard work, the struggles, the joys, all of it. Getting my hands dirty and watching our children grow and building something real with you. I still cannot believe you chose me. A cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. You had everything that mattered. You had heart and integrity and the ability to see me for who I really was. That was worth more than all my father's money." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Ethan Fletcher. I loved you when you were just a cowboy with nothing to offer. I loved you when we lived in that tiny cabin and struggled to make ends meet. And I love you now as a successful rancher with a beautiful family. It was never about what you had. It was always about who you are." He kissed her, deep and long, and she tasted the promise of more years ahead, more adventures, more challenges overcome together. They had built something beautiful out of nothing but love and hard work, and she could not imagine any other life worth living. The years continued their steady march. Thomas grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the ranch management, showing a natural gift for working with animals and people. Margaret did become a teacher, taking over Beatrice's classes and expanding them. William was quieter but had a mechanical mind, always tinkering and fixing things that broke. Clara was wild and free, riding horses as well as any boy, and declaring she would never marry, though Beatrice suspected that would change someday. In 1900, they had their first grandchild when Thomas married a local girl and had a son. Beatrice held the baby and marveled at how life continued its cycles. She was 40 now, with silver threading through her hair and lines on her face earned by years of sun and laughter. Ethan was 43, still strong but moving a bit slower after decades of ranch work. They were no longer the young couple who had fallen in love so quickly and married in haste, but their love had only deepened. They knew each other completely now, all the flaws and strengths, and loved each other more for that knowledge. They had weathered storms together, both literal and metaphorical. They had buried friends and celebrated births. They had built an empire from nothing but determination and devotion. On quiet evenings, they still sat on their porch and watched the sunsets that painted the desert in impossible beauty. Sometimes they talked, sharing thoughts and memories. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and simply being together. These were the moments Beatrice treasured most, the simple peace of being with the person who knew her best and loved her completely. "You remember that first day?" she asked one evening. "When I stepped off the train looking so lost," Ethan chuckled. "You looked terrified but trying hard to hide it. Your fancy dress was already tearing and you had more luggage than sense. You thought I would not last a week. I thought you would not last 3 days, but you proved me wrong in the best possible way. I fell in love with you so fast it scared me. One moment you were just a kind stranger helping me find a place to stay, and the next you were everything I wanted. Same for me. I took one look at you standing on that platform, all determination and terror, and something in me just knew. This is her. This is the one you have been waiting for." They sat in silence for a moment, comfortable and content. Around them, their ranch hummed with life. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses in the corrals, the sounds of their grandchildren playing somewhere inside. This was what they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. "I have no regrets," Beatrice said softly. "Not a single one. Every hard moment, every struggle, every sacrifice was worth it for this. For you, for our family, for this life we built together." Ethan squeezed her hand. "We made something good here, something real. Better than anything your father's money could have bought." "So much better," she agreed. "I walked away from wealth and I found something far more valuable. I found real love. I found you." They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The desert that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving when she first arrived had become home, beautiful in its own wild way. She had arrived here with nothing but hope and courage, and she had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, not because she had married wealth or position, not because her name opened doors or her father's money smoothed the way, but because she had found a man who valued her for herself, who worked beside her as an equal partner, who loved her not for what she had but for who she was. Ethan had nothing but his heart to offer, and it turned out that was everything. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge in the vast Arizona sky, they went inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. They had faced everything life could throw at them and emerged stronger. They had raised good children who were now raising children of their own. They had built a legacy not of money but of love and hard work and integrity. And every day, Beatrice woke up grateful for the choice she had made that spring day in 1883 when she stepped off a train into the unknown. She had walked away from everything, and in doing so, she had found everything that truly mattered. She had found real love, lasting love, the kind of love that made every sacrifice worth it and every hard day bearable. She had found Ethan Fletcher, a cowboy with nothing but his heart to offer, and that heart had been enough to build a lifetime on.